Hello everybody, welcome to the special weekend episode on Are we getting into a probable recession?
For most of the world economy, this is going to be a tough year, tougher than the year we leave behind. Why? Because the three big economies, US, EU, China, are all slowing down simultaneously. The US is most resilient. The US may avoid a recession.
The problem, I think, in the US is the fear that other small to medium banks have the same kind of exposure and regulators have not been forcing them to take the losses to build up capital. And so there are more potential SVBs waiting to happen. That is the concern. That's why the Treasury and the Fed stepped in.
Well, it is pretty clear that Dr. Raghuram Rajan, International Monetary Fund, all these organizations are believing that recession is around the corner. There is some collapse waiting to happen. And that is what was also the tweet coming from Mr. Uday Kotak. Now, to understand this entire scenario, we'll first talk about what is recession. Then we'll move into what are the triggers for the recession. And finally, what are the next steps and what are some of the takeaways for you and me. So let's get started with a simple example to understand what is recession. Imagine there is a food truck and that food truck owner, of course, is starting this food truck because he or she wants to develop, grow this business, continue to make profits and potentially start another food truck. That's the objective of any business owner, right guys? Any business owner is looking for that growth. And in normal economic situations, that will happen if they do a good job. How does that happen? Well, there will be some regular customers, then there will be some floating customers and some new customers all the time. And why is that the scenario? Because the population itself is increasing and the productivity or efficiency would also increase. The food truck owner will continue to make better food, hopefully, and also their efficiency, if they are serving 20 people right now every hour, they should be looking to serve 25 people every hour going forward. Now, if there are 200 people that they are able to serve in a day, and if the 200 people pay 200 rupees, you can see that they are making 40,000 rupees every single day. Good thing for the food truck owner. Now, if they want to go ahead and grow this food truck and start another food truck, 40,000 rupees is not enough, or let's say, even if they compile and grow into profits for the entire year, probably that amount is not enough. So they'll have to go to a bank to raise some loan, right? So you can see customers and banks are two important pillars for this food truck owner. Now, this is how our economy functions. And this is replace that food truck with Facebook, Google, Amazon, or replace it with the government itself, and everybody is looking to grow. Now, under some extraordinary situations though, such as a war, a pandemic, or a crisis situation like a banking crisis situation, these businesses, governments, or food trucks, they don't grow. Rather, their overall business or their overall production would shrink. Now, why is that the case? Because there is a lot of fear. People don't want to go and spend that money. They would rather want to keep that money in their bank account, or even if that is also not working out well, they'll go put it under their own mattress. Now, to understand exactly what is happening right now, we need to go back and look at the history a bit. The last three recessions, global recessions, were in 1990, then 2008 and 2020. Now, what are the reasons? 1990 recession was because of the Gulf War, a war, and 2008 was because of the housing crisis and then subsequently which led into a banking crisis. And 2020 is because of pandemic. Now you can see in 2023 we are looking at roughly all the three things together. A pandemic which is never ending, then the Russia-Ukraine war, and a potential banking collapse. So all these three things together are impacting the economy right now. To understand the recession, let's take a step back and understand all these three triggers which are working in tandem at the same time. So let's go back to 2020 March. When the pandemic kicked in, a lot of people lost their jobs. For example, The unemployment rate in the US touched 13% between April and June 2020. And in comparison, right now, the unemployment rate is 3 to 4%. So you can see it was literally off the charts. Subsequently, what the government did was they said, okay, this unemployment is something which is your fault. So we will give you some money and will deposit that money into your account. So it's not just the US government or the Indian government, a lot of governments around the world printed money and pushed that money into the bank accounts of citizens. Now that's a good thing. Otherwise, the food truck owner would have shut the shop. Now these guys, the entire population has some money. There is additional money into the economy. So they started going out and spending that money. Subsequently, the food trucks, the businesses around the world, they started prospering and they hired people, they started production. So of course, the unemployment rates came down and subsequently that cycle, the economic cycle, started once again itself. And of course, there was a lot more additional money into the system. So the prices started going up because people can pay more. Of course, the businesses will take more. However, in this scenario, the second episode started, which is the war. Now, what did war do to the economies around the world? Well, there are two aspects to it. Number one is oil and number two is food grains coming out of Ukraine. Ukraine basically produces and exports food grains to the rest of the world. Because of the war, when these exports stopped, the food grains prices around the world increased. Oil prices around the world increased. So the food truck owner now has to spend more to get that food truck somewhere because of the oil price increases, and also the food truck owner has to spend more to cook because the food, the grains, the tomatoes, onions, all these prices have increased. Subsequently, the prices of the meals also increased. He started charging more to the customers, and that is called as inflation, when the prices of goods increase. Well, the definition is something where the basket of goods which are considered for inflation could be very different, but this is the entire concept. Subsequently, when customers start seeing that, hey, the inflation is off the charts, of course, their purchasing patterns will also come down slowly. But government intervened after this second episode itself. The first episode being the pandemic, the second episode being the war. Now, the government said we need to get the inflation off quickly. Why? Why should the government care about inflation? Because inflation is basically the increase in prices which potentially the poorest of the people in the country cannot afford. And all the government policies around the world are basically to support the poorest and the weakest sections of the society. If those guys cannot afford, then the governments have to change. That is the reason why controlling inflation was becoming a super important thing for every single government. And what did they do to control this inflation? Now that is the trigger for us to move into the third topic, that is the banking crisis. So let's start with the inflation and the interest rates combination. So the banks, when they start increasing interest rates, what does it mean? Your interest or your EMI on your home loan will increase. Your EMI on your bike loan, car loan, all these loans increase. Also, the EMI that the food truck owner should pay on a business loan will also increase. When all these loans increase, what happens to the customer? They cannot spend more money on these additional items like going out and eating on a food truck because their EMI is increasing. Now that slowly will cool down the economy. And over the last 1 year, the interest rates in the US have been increased by up to 400 basis points. That is 4%. That is huge. It was almost close to zero for the last few years, and now the interest rates in the US are up to 4.75%. Huge increase. And when such sudden increase happens, we have to go back to the tweet by Mr. Uday Kotak and we have to understand that, hey, there is some accident waiting to happen. And that is exactly what happened with Silicon Valley Bank. And also that happened with Credit Suisse. Now I'm linking you a video over here. Please go ahead and understand why Silicon Valley Bank collapsed and also why Credit Suisse is in such bad situation. But the overall point is pretty much straightforward. Customers lost trust in the bank and they were taking out money from these banks. And what happens if customers take out money from the bank? They'll go ahead and purchase the safest asset that is possible, which is a bond. So they are taking out money from the economy. Because of that, the banks do not have more money to give out a loan to the business owner, to you and to me. This situation will lead to a credit crunch. This is called as a credit crunch, guys. And this credit crunch will lead to a potential downfall of the entire economy because there is not too much money, the growth will shrink even further. Well, interest rates increase will anyways cool off the economy, and anyways the economy is going to slow down, and this banking crisis is additional factor which is now leading to a steeper decline in the entire economic growth. And that is why we are staring at a potential recession sooner rather than later. Now, what can anybody do in this situation? What can the government do to start with? Well, not all the governments can control the Russia-Ukraine war, right? Number two, the pandemic, it is never ending. Nobody knows when it is going to control. And the third thing, what every government around the world is trying to do is control the fear around the banking crisis. That is the reason why we are hearing such statements.
I want to briefly speak about what's happening in Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. Today, thanks to the quick action of my administration over the past few days, Americans can have confidence that the banking system is safe. Your deposits will be there when you need them.
Now, what does this do? Ideally, all the customers should stay back, relax and say, hey, government is saying good things, so nothing should happen. But unfortunately, fear triggers more fear, and even with the government support, people are still taking out money. And that is the reason why, even when there is $30 billion of support coming into First Republic Bank, their shares dropped by 30%. That is the problem that governments around the world are facing as of today. And what happens to Credit Suisse is still up in the air. We literally don't know where this entire banking crisis is going to take us.
A report from Financial Times that UBS is in discussions to take over all or part of Credit Suisse, with the boards of Switzerland's two biggest lenders set to meet separately over the weekend. And as the FT writes, this would potentially be Europe's most historic banking combination if a deal were to come through.
The only good thing that we need to try to understand here is the governments are trying to contain the fear. Now, the second thing that what you and I should also understand and realize is that there could be a hard landing. That what it means is, hey, there could be a very steep fall in the growth, which means a very hard recession. And that could lead to unemployment, which means we have to make sure our emergency fund is full. And finally, as a business student, please keep an eye out on what is happening right now. And also I'm attaching a few materials for you to understand the basic definitions of all the topics that we have covered in this video. And I hope these definitions and this story can help you go ahead and narrate what the crisis that we are currently facing to a 5th standard student. Thank you so much, guys. And please do let me know if you have any feedback. If you like the video, please press on the like button and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye bye.